Look at me. Positive for Howard Marks. I'm placing you under arrest for the future murder of Sarah Marks and Donald Dubin. It was take place today, April 22nd. It's 0800 hours, 4 minutes. No.
Okay, I wanted to leave it right here, you guys. What are we talking about today? Minority Report. The future is now. The future is here, you guys. A viewer sent me this, some of this information a couple weeks back, and it's taken me a while to dig through documents, to dig through reports, to actually reach out to one of the attorneys involved. There's just so much to unpack here that it's going to take me a while. It's going to take a few videos. So, what are we talking about? We're talking about Pasco County Sheriff's Department. They have instituted a new program, or not new, it's a couple years old now. And so it's called the Sheriff Targeted Area Response, or at least that's the unit, the STAR unit. But what it does is it takes your information. I'll let the videos themselves speak more about exactly how they work. But it takes information about you. Have you ditched school? Do you have not perfect attendance? Things non-criminal related. And then people that you hang out with, or people that you know, people that you're just friends with on Facebook. Maybe you don't even really know them too well, but you know them through your cousin, who knows them through his cousin, just stuff like that. And everything goes into a list. And then if you are identified as part of this list, they come in and harass you and continuously harass you. Continue to harass you. I mean, it's just insane the steps that they take here. And I will be right back as we switch over to the next part. Alright, so next, we're going to go ahead and watch some of this video. We're not going to watch all of it, but this is from the Tampa Bay Times, who were the ones to first talk about this case over a year ago on what they are doing. So let's just watch a little bit of this.
Shit in there. Yeah. All the back windows are all shut down.
Oh, that makes like my head.
What?
B5, Bocom, it's not a blush Englishman. Alright.
Hey, send us some more units. We're fighting the whole family.
Nobody got no surgery.
He can move.
Hello, Sheriff's Office.
Alright, I want to talk about this one here.
Yeah, how are you guys doing tonight?
Doing good. It's my boss just going home.
Okay. Oh, okay.
Am I in trouble?
No, we were just going to go do check on him. So we're waiting for him to go home.
So, 15-year-old was labeled as a top 5 criminal, a category intended for key players in criminal networks. A 15-year-old is labeled as the same as a mafia boss. Alright? Picture that. A 15-year-old who we don't know what he was arrested for. He's on probation. But let's go ahead and watch what they do to him and his family, because this is insane.
Why am I going to testify that near-point charge?
Yeah, it's not about your charge. It's about your. It goes deeper than that. It's about your network, who you associate with, you're on probation.
Okay, I was like, I thought I near-point charge.
You have a lot of involvements in history of people that commit crime. Not saying you are doing that, right? But consider us like a mini PO probation officer. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'll give the good old knowledge knock for some of y'all chances like sleeping here or some shit.
Sheriff's office.
You need Rio?
Yep.
She's nice, I promise.
Hey, bro.
Just come and say hi to Rio.
Is he home?
Yeah, no, he's with his mom.
You need Rio?
Yeah.
Officer want to talk to you, Rio.
We're just here to say hi to Rio.
Hey Rio, what's going on, buddy?
Mind we chit-chat for a couple minutes?
Happy New Year.
2020.
Okay, so I want you to notice that they know he's not home. They've told him he's not home. And they just keep harassing his sisters, who are older than him. Okay, he's 15, one's 19, one's 22. But continuous harassment. I mean, just around the clock, continuously going over there. Now, it would take a lot to get me to agree with what cops do, okay? I am extremely biased against cops. I do not hide that fact. I do not pretend otherwise. We know where my bias is, and it is not for the cops. Okay? So that's where we're going to start this conversation at. They've got a very, very high bar to reach for me. So me being helpful to police is probably never going to happen. Okay? But what do you think this boy or his family was in that same position as I am? Before they started harassing him? Going to his house at all hours to knock on his door and talk to him? They say that they're doing this to stop him from committing crimes, knowing that they're always watching him. As we'll see in other videos here, they actually make crimes out of his parents because they won't, out of parents of these kids, because they won't let him talk to the kids. They say, well, get a lawyer. Talk to my lawyer if you want to talk to my son. And so then they find everything that they can to arrest people for minor, stupid crap. All right. Now in Florida, okay, I did look up the statute. They are allowed to arrest for any offense that they see, whether it's just a citation or a misdemeanor or a felony. If a cop witnesses it, they can arrest somebody for it. That is legal. Just because you can do something does not mean you should. This is atrocious. You want to talk about community policing? This is the complete opposite. Because nobody in this family or any of these families that is being involved in this is ever going to reach out to the cops at a time when they actually might need the cops. You think they're going to want cops coming in when they are being arrested for not wearing a seatbelt? Yeah, I doubt that that'll be top on their priority list either. What about if you arrest somebody because their grass is too tall? Arrest somebody because their fucking grass is too long. Yes, police. Police at their best. This is positive, great work by the police. Oh my gosh, what a wonderful job they are doing. Let's see what they do to his sisters while he's not home.
Hey, Kaylee.
Go pound on the window.
Come talk to me again. If you want to talk to me through the window, that's fine, but come talk to me for a moment.
Now, granted, the kid is on probation. Okay, he's 15 years old. I don't know what his probation is for. I don't really give a crap. I don't. As long as it wasn't for murder, nothing excuses this crap. Because he might commit a crime in the future. We're just going to continuously harass him and his family. Go knock on her window. his teenage sister's window so she will talk to him? Kiss my ass, officer. Again, what exactly are you trying to get out of these guys? And here's another challenge I have for anybody here that's watching this video. Can you honestly tell me if cops are watching you 24 hours a day, and the most minor things, such as your grass being too long, you will get arrested for? Can you tell me honestly that you would be completely free of all this, that they wouldn't be able to find anything to harass you on? You see that they threaten and actually do arrest the mother later on because there aren't enough numbers, visible numbers on the house. And they do that to somebody else too.
Haley!
On her window. She's innocent. She's never committed a crime.
Haley! You're about to have some issues. Come up to the window and talk to me if you want to keep the door closed. What?
Okay, well,
How
if he's
the-
not here, then show us that he's not in his room.
Okay.
But I've already said that he's not in his room. I'm not
I
letting.
have to see for myself.
Do you want me to open up his window or something?
No, I need to walk through here. You're 19 years old, correct?
Why does that matter?
Because you're an adult and you live here.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean.
Okay, you don't live here, so you can shut off and go back there, okay?
What are you talking to her like that for?
Because you're interrupting me while I'm trying to talk to his sister right now. Are you his brother or
That's
sister or his mom?
I'm his sister.
Oh, great. How old are you? How old are you?
22.
Okay, so you can let us walk through right now and make sure he's not here in compliance with his probation, or I can throw both of you guys a citation for not having numbers on the house. What do you want to do?
We want to violate your rights to be free from the Fourth Amendment violations, to be secure in your house, to be secure in your possessions. If you don't allow this, we're going to cite you for some minor BS charge. Okay. And this video does keep on going. Again, Tampa Bay Times, the name of this video is How a Florida Sheriff Harasses Families. This is another one of their victims.
Wow. Oldest. Moved to Pasco County, Florida in 2015 after their oldest son Bobby was kicked out of the neighboring school district for fighting. Soon, they were...
So the kid was kicked out of his school for fighting, so they moved to Pasco County.
Visited by the sheriff's Strategic Targeted Area Response, or STAR unit, which was created to, quote, hunt down prolific offenders. It was the first of many visits to come.
Pasco County Sheriff's Department wanted to come by and introduce the STAR team to my family. We heard about your son in the other county. We want you guys to know that we'll be keeping an eye on you.
A few days later, deputies arrested Bobby, claiming they'd found sandwich bags with trace amounts of weed during their first visit. He was 15 at the time. Bobby was acquitted of the charges, but then the sheriff's office seemed to turn their focus to Robert.
They started coming every day, 3, 4, 5. They didn't even wait for me to come home. They'd come home early when my kids were home and bang on the windows and doors and, where's your dad at? Where's your brother at?
Robert says the STAR team started ticketing him for things like his grass being too high or his address being hard to see from the street.
Well, the numbers aren't very visible from the roadway because of the lights in the way. It has a 0 on it. But,
Oh, okay.
but still, I think I can go with that because the lights in the way.
But then, he alleges, they'd hold on to the tickets and arrest him for failing to appear at his court date. Over 6 months, he was arrested. The arrests only stopped when he packed up his family and fled the county. Then,
So the only way to stop the arrest is to flee the county. Stupid arrest. Now this is a guy, and we'll learn this in another video, the next video that we watch. He wanted to be a lawyer. He moved, he was going through all the preliminary classes to become a lawyer. However, with all these arrests on your record, it's going to make it really hard to pass the bar requirements of good conduct and all that stuff that they put you through. Even if all the cases are dismissed, which they were, the fact that you were arrested for it could really harm a really in-depth search like what most states do with a bar exam. Or after you pass your bar exam, then they look at your fitness to become a lawyer. And part of that is what have you been arrested for, not what you've been found guilty of, but what you have been arrested for. Are you somebody that we think will make a good lawyer? Because I know as much as people hate attorneys or make jokes about attorneys, they do have actual standards that they have to uphold. And the bars do try to keep those who will not meet those standards out from becoming attorneys in the first place.
Last year, Robert found out he and his family weren't alone.
A recent investigation by the Tampa Bay Times revealed the Pasco County Sheriff's Office is listing more than 400 at-risk students as potential future criminals.
The Tampa Bay Times investigation found that the Pasco County Sheriff's Office has maintained a secret database of people they think are likely to break the law, calling it intelligence-led policing. The agency also uses information shared by the school district and Florida Department of Children and Families, like attendance records, grades, and details about students' home life. The data then is used to track, quote, juveniles who are at risk of becoming prolific offenders.
Oh, it's my son.
Okay. So we are going to go to the lawsuit here because I do talk about it some.
Lawsuit against Pasco County Sheriff Chris Naca. All 4 plaintiffs are alleging harassment and claim the program violated their constitutional rights during search and seizures. Sheriff Naca has denied the claims, defended the constitutionality of the ILP program, and moved to dismiss the case. The school district is also facing backlash for its part in the ILP program. This spring, a coalition of parents and national civil rights groups joined together to push the district to stop sharing information with the police indefinitely.
I had one student every day he wrote on a sticky, and I legit kept every single sticky.
And some of these things are like over 6 years old.
They're
right?
over.
I'm investigating the district. Earlier this spring, they started looking into whether the school violated FERPA, a federal privacy law which prohibits students' records from being shared. The district said in a statement that all contracts with the sheriff's office include, quote, safeguards for the proper use of student information. But the national privacy groups in the coalition say those safeguards don't adequately protect students' rights, and the program itself is racist.
When parents or students...
So, again, this is just insane. We are going to try to read some of this statement from the sheriff's office because they think there's nothing wrong with this. The intelligence-led policing philosophy was not created by the Pasco Sheriff's Office. Rather, this program is based on academic research and originated in the United Kingdom in the 1990s. Focuses limited resources on necessary areas based on criminal activities implemented by nearly every law enforcement agency in the Tampa Bay area. It is not a program in the Pasco Sheriff's Office, but instead is a philosophy that guides decision making with the focus on reducing victimization in our community. It is not in any way, shape, or form the ideals or implementations of projected in the film Minority Report, despite the reporting's assertion. If you are being harassed by the police because of what some algorithm thinks you might do in the future, that is future crime. And like I said, you guys, tell me honestly, who here thinks that you could survive constant surveillance and harassment without being found guilty or being guilty of something? Imagine getting pulled over because you turned your blinker on 25 feet before turning instead of the 30 feet that your state law requires. Imagine, well, just the most minor crap, you guys. Tell me the truth. Who here can say with complete honesty that you would survive a full audit like this. I wouldn't. I know that. I can't even pretend like I would be close. Can't remember what this guy. So here they're actually going back to his old neighborhood and talking about the grass again. So we'll skip the rest of that. Now here, this is the one I found most interesting. The lawsuit itself was brought by the Institute for Justice. It has been joined by other major groups have also put out statements in support of it or filed briefs. Briefs normally don't happen in a local district court or a federal district court level. Those typically happen at the Court of Appeals and most certainly at the Supreme Court. But there have been briefs filed in support of this case by other groups. We're going to be taking a look at this lawsuit, you guys. This is just the first video. Every part of this just shouts wrong to me. Not just because cops are the ones doing it, which, again, I am biased against the cops. So that's probably going to have my heckles up anyway. But you're making enemies out of possible friends. Because I doubt this kid had hatred for the cops. Do you really think that he's going to turn to the cops now? I mean, just keep thinking that through your head, you guys. I know this is like the third time I've said that. But what is this type of behavior towards suspects and their families actually going to do to their families? Is it going to make them turn to them? I guess we could go back to a different video there where you see 11-year-old being harassed because of what her brother did. Or might do, because he hadn't actually been found guilty of anything. So you think that these kids are ever going to trust the police?
Justice. I'm Melanie Hildreth. For many listeners, a law enforcement program
are going to commit future unspecified crimes. And then it is harassing those people in their homes and also on the streets, following them around, visiting them untold times, sometimes multiple times a day, certainly multiple times per month or even week, gathering information on them, hassling them, all because it predicts that they're going to commit these, again, unspecified, completely imaginary future crimes. Now, the Pasco County Sheriff's Office calls these people prolific offenders. But to be on the list, you don't have to be prolific, and you don't even necessarily have to be an offender. We know from our investigation that some people on the list are as young as 15 years old. And the algorithm takes into account things like being arrested, not necessarily convicted, or even being named as a witness in somebody else's police report. And then based on that information, the Pasco County Sheriff's Office is conducting what it calls prolific offender checks. And this means it's coming to your house, it's asking to see the person on the list, to come into the house. They're going around to the backyard, they're peering over the fence, they're looking in the windows. They're asking intrusive questions about people's social networks, what they're posting on Facebook, who they're dating, who their friends are. And then if you don't answer these questions, they're threatening people with what would be essentially pretextual code enforcement. So they're citing people for having tall grass, for not having numbers on their mailbox, even for having chickens in their backyards, all because they're not fully cooperating with this dystopian program. And it's even going so far as to arrest people. So the sheriffs arrest people for things like not wearing a seatbelt, or for not appearing for a hearing about your tall grass. And then, I think the other sort of key thing to mention here is the harassment isn't limited just to people on the list. So the sheriff is harassing people just because they're in a family with someone on the list. They're showing up to their house, asking questions about their family members. And again, if the sheriff thinks they're not fully cooperating, then they're subjecting them to the same kind of consequences, the code enforcement, the arrests, and everything that comes with that.
Being on the list has these huge ramifications, and I wanted to talk a little bit more about what gets someone on the list? I know there's a lot about it that's very mysterious. What do we know about how somebody as young as 15 or 14 could possibly have enough markers on their record or wherever to qualify as a prolific offender?
Yeah, so a lot of it is kind of shrouded in mystery, but we do know some things. So part of it, like I mentioned, they're looking at not just arrests, but also, or it's not just convictions, but also arrests, and also even just appearing as a suspect or a witness. They're also looking at things like your social background. They're asking, do you come from a broken home? Do you come from a family where people have committed crimes? What's your socioeconomic background? Are you getting bad grades in school? Things like that. All of that can factor into the decision to put somebody on a list. And then, I think there is sort of an element of discretion to it as well on the part of the sheriff. And obviously that's something that we're very much looking forward to learning more about as the case proceeds and we're able to sit the sheriff down in a deposition and start asking some questions.
You mean they're not immediately forthcoming about the secret that they kind of shaped together to get the list?
Well, I think, like I said, we know a lot about how the list is put together, but we definitely have questions about how specific individuals end up on the list.
Ari, I know this sounds horrible in principle. I wondered if you could talk a little bit about what it's like in practice. I know you spent a lot of time talking to people who were targeted through the program. What is it like for them? What do they experience as somebody that Pasco has decided is, a potential future criminal?
It's terrifying. And I don't use that word lightly. I use it deliberately because the only way that you can really describe what it's like to be in your home and be the constant subject of attention from police when you've done nothing wrong is terror. And that's in fact what all of our clients...
Okay, you guys, I know he just said it, but I want you to picture that. Cops are constantly at your house, knocking on your door. You ignore the knocks on your door. Then they start pounding on your windows. If we go back to this video here, we see where they actually wait for a kid to leave for school because his mom wouldn't let them talk to him. And then, so constant harassment. And yes, terror. I would say terror is a good word here. This constant terror that you have of, oh my God, they're back, what now? Can you guys just imagine what that would be like? God, I had a sheriff pull onto my property a few months back about a horse. I know I commented on a video about that before, I guess almost a year ago now, but and my first question was, what the hell is he doing here? Then it turned out there was a loose horse that came onto that he chased onto my property. So, just one sheriff showing up out of nowhere got my heckles up. I wasn't happy until I found out what was going on. And as soon as when the livestock board member was on his way, or livestock brand inspector, was on his way, that is when I asked the sheriff deputy to leave my property, as was my right. The horse was contained, there was no more danger, there was no risk of anything. I asked him to leave and he left, no problem. But what if he didn't? Or what if he came back to my house the next day? And the day after that? 5 times in one day. What if he waited off of my property for my daughter's school bus to drop her off? To just talk to her? Those kinds of things. What if, again, all this harassment, this terror, if cops are always showing up at your house and talking to you at odd hours and just about the stupidest crap, and every time that they come, they find something else minor just to cite you on or to arrest you for. Tell me that's not living in terror. That you would be okay with that. Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm good with this. Come on, I'll see you tomorrow. Bye. Would you like some coffee?
Felt it's sort of the unifying term that you hear people use when discussing their experience with the Pasco County Sheriff's Office and this program in particular. And it's part of why IJ felt like we just had to challenge it. And, you know, to get into the specifics of what our clients in this case endured, starting with Robert Jones. He's a hardworking guy. He's got 4 kids. He relocated to Pasco County, and police came by and said they wanted to speak with his son, informing him that, you know, this is part of a Scared Straight program that we do, and we'd like to help keep your son on the straight and narrow. And if you'll allow us inside, we'll just chat with him really briefly, and we'll make sure that everything is on the up and up with him. And so Robert said, "Okay, come on inside. Help me out if that's what you're here to do." And they went on in, and they ended up leaving with an empty baggie that they said later tested positive for trace amounts of marijuana. There were no charges pursued in connection with this apparent find.
Okay, I do want to point out contradictory videos here. The news report said that the charges were dropped. This guy is saying there were no charges at all. I don't know. Either way.
But nevertheless, that landed Robert's son on this list, and he became the subject of regular and repeated and unwanted visits from the Pasco County Sheriff's Office. And each time he asked, "Are you guys here to investigate a crime?" And they told him no, and so he wouldn't let them in. And if he wasn't there, they'd be banging on the door and banging on windows while his daughters were inside hiding under the bed, afraid of the police. His son was afraid to go out. And he wanted to protect his family, and so he endured the brunt of the Pasco County Sheriff's Office program that was designed in part to target kids. And so he was taking the brunt of this on behalf of his children, and ultimately former deputies of the Pasco County Sheriff's Office have talked about Robert's case and acknowledged that we couldn't get his kid, so we went after the dad. And so he was arrested multiple times for trivial violations. As Rob mentioned earlier, they would cite him for trivial things like tall grass or not having house numbers, not tell him about hearings on those violations, and then arrest him for missing those hearings. And so finally all of this kind of culminated several years ago, where after one arrest he said enough is enough, and in the middle of the night after getting out of jail, he packed whatever belongings he could. He took his family of 6, packed them into a car, and moved them into a hotel under cover of darkness because they were so terrified of the Pasco County Sheriff's Office and what they seemed to be able to get away with. He just felt like there's no way that...
It flips and it becomes almost immediately antagonistic, and it seems, as an outsider looking in, well, how could they not eventually, in that dynamic, you're going to make criminals, and that, it sounds like, is what happened to both of the clients. In Robert's case, I mean, he has had no arrests since. Had he had anything on his record before?
As a very young man, I think he had a minor run-in with police, but by no means was he some sort of criminal. And I think you're absolutely right that he never would have ended up in the predicaments that he was in, the legal predicaments that he was in, if not for this program.
So I think the amazing thing about Robert is this is a guy who was dreaming of going to law school. I mean, he was, not just dreaming of it, he was working towards it very concrete.
Special to Pasco County.
Sorry, guys, I'm going to
Can
skip
you talk
around
a little bit about what our claims are in the...
As I'm saying, I'm going to skip around. You can come to the Institute for Justice's Facebook page. They've got a lot of great videos, lawsuits that they're involved in. Great videos, you guys. Good source. Go to their website, check them out, make a donation. They are awesome.
The challenge that we brought to the predictive policing program.
So this was a fun case to put together, because when the government comes up with creative new ways to violate people's constitutional rights, you really have to go back to first principles to figure out what is it that they're doing wrong. And so as we were thinking about this case, we ultimately realized at bottom, this is a Fourth Amendment case. And the Fourth Amendment guarantees your right to be secure in your home. And if that means anything, it means that police can't come to your house and repeatedly harass you in your home just because they think you're going to commit some sort of future crime. In a case called Terry versus Ohio, the Supreme Court held that if the police want to stop you on the street and ask you questions, they have to have reasonable suspicion that you've committed a crime.
And the mischaracterization of that, sorry, Mr. Attorney. They can stop anybody. They can ask anybody on the street what any questions they want. The Supreme Court said that they can ask you just like I can ask you a question. I can ask you for your ID. You can tell me to screw off. But they can ask you anything they want. They can ask you for your ID. They can ask you to talk to you. They can do all that stuff. That's consensual contact. They cannot demand it. They cannot hold you without the standards that he's talking about. So, big mischaracterization there. I don't appreciate that. God, I hate hearing that because, again, I do want to support them. But be fully open and honest with what you're saying.
And if the police are going to harass you in your house, they should have to have at least that, if not more. But they don't have anything like that here. They're going off of future crimes, not any kind of suspicion that any crime has already occurred.
So under the law, just to jump in and ask a question about that, the prediction of the program doesn't qualify. Like saying, well, yeah, we have a reason to believe it. Our scientific algorithm here says that you're going to be a problem. So that doesn't cut it.
Yeah, so I have two thoughts about that. One is,
does the scientific algorithm provide probable cause? Interesting question. And if this makes it through the discovery phase, one that will be answered in court. Interesting.
It's so, when we hear the word algorithm, we often think, oh, like that's spooky and scary because, the computers are really smart. But I think of this case, it's half Minority Report and it's half Dumb and Dumber. Because the algorithm is just not that sophisticated. It's based on taking a bunch of numbers that are kind of picked out of a hat for, you get this many points for an arrest, this many points for being a witness, and we just add it up and give you a score. And then there's kind of like a spice of human discretion based on your social background and things like that. And it's just not, the precogs in Minority Report. It's very different from that. And then, on top of that, I mean, the standard under the Fourth Amendment is, does the government have reasonable suspicion that you've committed a crime, not reasonable suspicion that you're a bad person who might do something bad in the future. That's just not how the Fourth Amendment works.
So that's obviously, that in some ways is probably going to be one of the most familiar kinds of claims, that if we're talking about police coming into somebody's house with no real legitimate reason to do it, that does seem like Fourth Amendment violation, search and seizure. Is that's the primary claim in our case?
Well, that's sort of the lead claim, but I think, as we thought about this, there are absolutely other claims that we're very excited about as well. And another one is our procedural due process claim. And, the way I explain this, or I think about it myself, is, that being on this list is kind of like being on probation, but it's probation for a future crime that hasn't happened yet. And if the government's going to put you on probation for a real crime, they give you a hearing first. And if the government's going to put you on probation for these, sort of hypothetical future crimes, then they need to do the same thing. But they're not. They're putting people on these lists without any kind of a hearing. And once you're on the list, there's nothing you can do to challenge it or to try to get yourself taken off. And then we also have claims about the code enforcement. So, we've talked a lot about how they're going after people in a very pretextual way for these sorts of code enforcement issues like tall grass, missing numbers on your mailbox, things like that. And that's an equal protection violation because they're treating people differently simply because they're not complying with the program. And it's also a substantive due process problem because you're essentially punishing people under these laws for reasons that have nothing to do with the purpose of the law. And then our final claim is a First Amendment claim. You have a right to associate with your family members and not to be singled out because you're in a family with somebody who the government thinks, is a quote-unquote prolific offender.
So one of the most striking quotes in the Tampa Bay Times piece, which I commend to all listeners, to me was the deputy who summarized the purpose of the program as being, we want to harass these people until they move or sue. And the immediate reaction that I have to that is like, that seems like just this fundamentally illegitimate use of the police power. Does that factor into does that way that they're using the law to try to get you to do something else, not just in the case of code enforcement, but to really drive people that they've deemed that they don't want around out of the county? Does that factor into the legal claims, or is that just too big to try to tackle in a single lawsuit?
No, that definitely factors into our due process claim as well. It's focused there. We're focused on the code enforcement, but we're also focused on the program more generally. And that you're, in the case of family members, you're punishing people for things that they think someone else might have done. But even in the case of people on the list, they're punishing people for things they haven't done yet, and they may never do. And there's a definite due process problem with all of that.
So this program has gotten a lot of attention, from IJ, from others. The Southern Poverty Law Center commented on our case when we launched it. Ari, could you talk about the interest that the situation in Pasco is getting, and what perspective the various groups that have investigated bring to it, and how it's similar to IJ's perspective, and maybe how it's different?
Sure. When the Tampa Bay Times article was making its rounds, and
perhaps for many of those groups, some of the low-hanging fruit in the program could also be, ironically, that discretion piece, where if you're saying that someone is a risk because of their background, and that opens up the potential for all sorts of potentially profiling based on race, based on class. Is that something that very banal government program that has come to exist, continuing to exist, because it's almost a $3 million program that employs 30 people, right? So there's a strong incentive, we were trying to figure out how to approach it, and it may be a little bit of a novel case in certain ways. Does that mean that the odds are stacked against us in court? And if so, what does it mean if we succeed here, or I guess conversely, if we don't? What is?
This is the most interesting question, and one that no attorney ever wants to answer, at least not publicly. What if we lose? There are many grounds that they can lose on. Okay, let's face it. A lot of these claims that they are making in their lawsuit, and we're going to go through it, they are not clearly established. Some of the things that they are say, there's nothing on point to this program. That's how idiotic this program is nobody's tried it because they knew it was bad. They've never taken this program to the level that these cops have, because that's bad. How can these cops live with themselves knowing that they just arrested some 75-year-old grandma when all they were doing was harassing her grandson who wanted to go to school that day? Everything about this just pisses me off. But it might get dismissed because of qualified immunity. And this is where the ruling that everybody says from last year, that everybody says, ooh, that's a game changer. Really, this is a big test to that. Is, even though there's no cases on point, is what they are doing common sense enough that they shouldn't get qualified immunity? That is the question. That's the question that the courts are going to answer. And honestly, I don't know how it's going to turn out. I think, and we'll go over it when we look at the lawsuits and the responses and stuff. Me personally, I think that this case on it as a whole has maybe a 25% chance to make it through summary judgment for qualified immunity, because there is nothing on point for any of it. There are cases on its periphery, right there. It's right there on the edge, but there's nothing on point. So how binding is that Supreme Court decision saying, well, it's not, there's nothing on point, but it's common sense that you can't put somebody in a cell filled with shit? Is this at that level? Or was that case on its own and in a vacuum because of how atrocious that was? And in my opinion, the behavior of these cops is also atrocious. Is just as atrocious. They're making criminals out of non-criminals. When you give a guy a ticket, then you don't, or when you supposedly give the guy a ticket for his lawn, then you don't give him the actual ticket, the summons to court, then you arrest him for failure to appear, and then that case is later thrown out because the judge realizes that the guy was never given the freaking ticket. You tell me that's okay? That's lawful? That's quality policing? I do. I want to hear from the cops. I want to hear people that agree with this program. In fact, I would love to do a sit down with you. Let's set up a Zoom meeting. Let's have a conversation about it. If you disagree with my stance on this case, if you disagree with me and you think that these cops do the right thing, that harassing these families is proper, ticketing them for their lawn or a number, again, finding every tiny detail in their lives. If you truly think that is positive policing, I would love to have a conversation with you. So reach out to me. I'm going to post my Discord in the description there. Come join my Discord. Message me. Let's have a conversation. Let's get on Zoom. We'll record a video for everybody. Because everything about this case, this is another one of those, just blows your mind. This can't be real. You know how many times I had to say that? This cannot be real. This can't be real. This just can't. This has to be fake. Somebody has to be faking this story. But let's see what the attorney's answer is to, do you think this is going to make it very far?
What is the result of that in the law because of the way we've structured this case?
Well, I always hate to, handicap victory in my own cases. There's no, either you're saying that you're going to lose, or you're saying that you're going to win, and either sounds kind of bad.
Let's just say totally neutrally, what could happen if we win? What could happen if we lose?
Well, actually, honestly, I do think that our Fourth Amendment claim in particular, all of our claims are strong, and I think we'll win on all of our claims. But, our Fourth Amendment claim in particular, it's intuitive, and it fits with the text of the amendment. It follows from the precedents, and we're just right about everything. But to me, that claim, I would be shocked if we don't win. But hey, I've been wrong before. Look though, I in terms of the consequences of the decision here, there are other cities that have adopted these types of programs, including Chicago and Los Angeles both adopted them and then abandoned them because they realized they're not effective. And the Pasco Sheriff's Office is putting this forward. Their materials say this is supposed to be a model for other cities, and we know other cities are looking at it. We know that this is something that appreciative policing is controversial, but it's also an attractive idea to law enforcement. So there's huge stakes here, and I think beyond even just this type of specific program, there's also just a sort of more broad trend in law enforcement. And I think law enforcement is, attracted to this idea that we're going to go out and we're going to stop crime before it happens. And that is not necessarily a bad thing if it's done in the right way. But what we're saying in this case is that if you're going to do that, you have to respect individual liberties. And you can't sweep aside people's individual civil rights just because you think that they might someday commit a crime.
Okay, we're going to end that there. I'm going to back this up to right here again. It's never wrong. It's never wrong till it comes after you. That's the way we begin the video. That's the way we'll end this video. It's never wrong till it comes after you. I don't want it to come after me. I don't want it to come after you. That is why I have a problem with this case. That's why I have a problem with this program. Have a great day.